What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. I hope that you were able to get a break, a rest, some sleep, and are feeling refreshed for this week's lecture. This is Professor Smith, and this week we are looking at yellow power and the creation of an API, or Asian and Pacific Islander pan ethnicity, right? And so to begin this conversation, I want to talk about this concept of macro nationalism and its relationship to this concept or prefix of pan, right? When we're talking about pan, we're talking about the Greek word for all, right? And pan has been used to really describe macro nationalisms or movements seeking to extend nationalism beyond national boundaries or governments, right? And some examples of this include like this concept of religious unity, pan-Islamic, pan-Christian, right? It also can include geographical or hemispheric cooperation, pan-Americanism, right? And it also can include racial solidarity, right? Or ethnic solidarity, and we have pan-Africanism, right? And so when we talk about this concept of pan and macro nationalism is a space that could be used for resistance and include a powerful strategy of numbers, right? Because there is power in numbers. Now, pan-ethnicity or pan-ethnic refers to the political and cultural collective, right? Made up of people from several but distinct tribal and national origins. And so within this, I'm thinking about the different like pan-Latinx community, which includes, folks of Mexican descent, Puerto Rican descent, South American descent, with the exception of apparently Argentina. I don't know why. I heard because they killed off a lot of their indigenous people, and so a lot of the folks that make up Argentina are folks of Spaniard or Spanish descent, which are folks of European descent. And so when we're talking about Pan-Latinx, right, we're talking about those of Central America, the Caribbean, right, pan-ethnic. And so when we're talking about pan-Asian groups, right, we're also looking at the very different national origins, like folks of Chinese descent, folks of Japanese descent, folks of Thai descent, of Indian descent, right? But not only these different national origins, right, but that they're also different, divided among class, language, and generational lines, right? And so when we're looking at like social justice movements, specifically during the 60s, you see this creation of a pan-ethnic collective for folks of Asian descent. And so the reason, right, is for a political the reason for this united collective is to change one's social positioning and resources allocated to those communities, right? And so you see, despite these differences, people of Asian descent have united to protect and promote their collective interests. Now, that doesn't mean that when they promote their collective interests that there isn't some division within a pan-ethnic group, right? For example, marginalizations of different Asian communities within the larger within the larger Asian communities. So, for example, you rarely hear about folks of Eastern Asian descent, right? And mostly folks of Western Asian descent. But again, there is strength in numbers. And so this concept of pan-ethnic, right, is a political strategy because there is power in numbers. So the genesis of pan-ethnicity in the United States happened during the 60s, and it was a result of the Black Power movement and anti-colonial international struggles, right? Who basically positioned the idea of, community interest positioning the idea that, again, strength is in numbers. Forming coalition is better to achieve the resources that our community needs, to achieve the civil rights that we have been denied, to achieve, right, some of these anti-oppressive conditions that a lot of our ancestors have been fighting for generations, right? And so you see this Black Power movement really combining marginalized voices and bodies together, right, to create this like this large collective of different pan ethnic groups, right? And so this is where you get to the Red Power movement, which are where the represented American indigenous community. This is where you get Yellow Power, right? Asian communities and Brown Power Latinx communities. It was at the root of this was forming coalitions to fight colonial ideologies and 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 laws and social statuses that really positioned us in a racial hierarchy. And so prior to the 60s, right, we've talked about some of the movements specifically, excuse me, unionism, where you see this interracial, interethnic coalition of workers joining together to receive better wages, to, fight oppressive living conditions, right? And so it's interesting that there wasn't a thing prior to 1960s that would be considered pan-Asian or pan-ethnic coalition of Asian people, right? But one of the major reasons is that when we talk about, historically, those folks who were in those unions who were fighting against, labor exploitation, we're talking about Asian immigrants, right? And so when we have Asian immigrants, again, these are distinct people. They come from different uh 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 environments, different geographical locations, right? And so of course their language is going to be different. And if you cannot communicate, right, it's very difficult to be united, right? And so what you see is prior to World War II, Pan-Asian unity wasn't feasible because most of the people of Asian descent were immigrants and did not speak a common language. However, with the war, serving in support of the war, and when I mean support roles, I'm talking about those folks who work in those factories, right? Where you had to communicate and come in contact with other people who may be of Asian descent, but from different geographical spaces, such as Japan, such as Thailand, such as India, right? And so you get this intergroup communication because of serving next to each other in the war, and honestly, because within World War II, segregated units, you're going to be most likely serving with people who look like you, right? So you get this intergroup communication and contact, right, which facilitated this immersion of a pan-Asian consciousness. So what now, this is one of the reasons that, coming from my, intellectual background of Black studies, I'm thinking about how they, during enslavement, they prevented enslaved people from coming together collectively to discuss because they were fearing of conspiracy to riot, right, to rebel. And so it's interesting that this concept of collective communication and contact, right, facilitated this Pan-Asian consciousness, social consciousness that then led to the Asian American movement, right, during the 60s, that was a part of the larger people's movement, direct actions aimed at dismantling colonial structures, and really moving to a more equitable and equal society.